Welcome, welcome. All right. So welcome everybody to Inspiring Innovators, a behind the scenes look at the Tech Challenge. I'm Alan, and today we are super excited to talk to you about the Tech Challenge. A few housekeeping items before we get officially started here. So today's program is going to be recorded, and we would like to thank the Tech Interactive sponsors, especially our members. You bring meaning to much of what we do, and it's always so nice to hear when an experience you've had has affected your love of STEM, learning, and empowered your inner engineer. Please never stop sharing your photos, your pictures, your stories with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of our social channels. You have amazing photos and stories about your time doing the Tech Challenge or even visiting the Tech. We love those stories. Just keep sharing those, okay? All right. So we miss you. We miss you and all of the innovators and engineers who discover their STEM potential inside of our building. We encourage you to explore the Tech Interactive at Home and the Tech Interactive en Casa so that you and your family can keep building and innovating. You can visit us at www.thetechathome.org. Be sure to look out for our member newsletter as well. Make sure you get access, early access to future activities. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions for our presenters, go ahead and put those in the chat feature, and we're going to look at those and we'll then give them to the presenters later. Before we go any further, we do have a poll that we would like to ask you. How many people are viewing in your home today? How many in your household are watching this? So take just a moment to answer that poll. Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much for doing that. So before we go any further, I do have a couple amazing people that I want to introduce you to. So with me today are Greg Brown and Abby Longcor. And, you know, not many of you may know that before the Tech Interactive existed in our big Mango home, there was the Tech Challenge. The annual youth engineering design program serves 3,000 kids every year by asking them to get creative, building a device to solve a real world problem, like building an earthquake safe structure or launching and landing a lab in space. Today, two of the rock stars behind the program are here with us today. And we're going to peel back that innovation curtain and give us a look at what it's like to get thousands of kids excited about engineering and problem solving. So Greg Brown co-founded the Tech Challenge 34 years ago. He is a Stanford-trained design thinker with a passion for hands-on learning and a penchant for problem solving. He worked as a Silicon Valley R&D manager for close to 20 years, directing projects in robotics and global technology training. You may recognize him from the Tech Challenge Showcase with his unique hard hat designs that he has every year. Also with us today is Abby Longcor, the Senior Director of the Tech Challenge. She's helped grow the program to include more underserved students and girls during her time here. She was also a high school teacher, an education grants manager, and named Silicon Valley Business Journal's annual 40 under 40 list in 2016. So thank you both for joining us today. So we're going to go ahead and hop in. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. First things first, question, I'll go ahead and ask Abby and Greg if you would like to follow up. How do you go about creating a new tech challenge?
So that's actually a really involved process, Alan. Each challenge, so like for example, this year's challenge, which is launching this month in October, we started working on it in January. So every challenge, we start working on it in January. We start with a giant brainstorming session. And usually in about a 2-hour session, we generate anywhere from 100 to 200 unique ideas of things that could possibly be a tech challenge. Then there's a lot of detailed work that goes into kind of narrowing that down. And we have maybe 25 or 30 ideas that we have serious discussion about. And then we narrow that list to maybe about 5 ideas, and we send those ideas to students for their feedback to see what they're excited about, both as sort of general general feedback of just which idea sounds cool, as well as focus groups, so we can kind of see how different groups like different things. So if there's an age bias with the ideas, or if there's gender bias with the ideas, that's something that we take into consideration in terms of picking a topic moving forward. And then we move into a prototyping where we actually have to figure out what the challenge is going to be. And so we build a bunch of prototypes to try to figure out what it is that we're going to have the kids do. And we also bring usually traditionally kids in to help test that more. So you can see a couple examples here of both the two on the outside are things that our team built for two different challenges, and then some students that have come in to do some testing in the middle prior to the challenge being released, so we can check our assumptions and make sure that things are kind of leveled correctly for students. So I don't know if Greg wants to add on, I'm sure.
Of course. Well, to me, the main thing to notice is that we call it a challenge and not a competition. The kids, we're trying to find a real world problem, something that meets a real need, that the kids can attack the need and then come up with great solutions. So they're not necessarily ever really competing against each other. They're competing against the challenge. And that way, everyone has a chance to do their best work and to do something that's inspiring to them. We follow the same steps Abby mentioned, of course, which are really part of the engineering design process. So it's funny because we use the same process to design the tech challenge that the kids use to complete the tech challenge.
I think it's so funny that we have this photo here. You both mentioned the kind of the engineering process, the problem solving process. I feel like we've all been our young engineer in the middle photo here on the left that's kind of looking around like, is this idea gonna work? Like, I feel like that's all that every one of us have kind of experienced that in essence at one point in time. So this is a really, really involved process. Question for both of you, maybe we'll start with Abby again. Can you tell us any stories about challenges that don't turn out the way you expected, or maybe about testing?
Yeah, so I think every year we have teams who come up with ideas for things that we never envisioned as being possible solutions, because we have a group of roughly 10 to 15 people that mostly volunteers and community members, professional engineers who help us prototype every challenge. And so we all build our own solutions, we create our own designs, and everyone attacks the problem really differently, I would say. And so it's cool to see both the situation where students attack it in the same way you did, and you're like, oh, that's like what I did. But then also ones who come up with like these really crazy out of the box ideas. This young gentleman in the red hard hat here, you can't really tell from the picture, but that building is actually entirely suspended by strings. And so it's really like only attached to the foundation in one place by like one strip of wood in the middle. And the whole thing just swings like this. And the idea was really to try to deal with the problem of roof drift, and the fact that, as buildings move, they can't sway like this if they're next to other tall buildings, because then they would hit each other and that would be problematic. And so they came up with this idea of like, what if we suspended our whole building on strings? And they use things like string and floss and different things to anchor it. And so they just come up with all sorts of really cool things that, we wouldn't have necessarily thought of, or we didn't think of when we were originally envisioning it.
I love to see those things. And I love to see when kids maybe even reinterpret the challenge a little bit or come at it from a whole different angle. We were looking at it maybe the way a trained engineer would look at it of, here's, we're going to use this set of tools to solve this problem. And they come with a different set of tools, or maybe no tools at all. And so they come at the problem from a completely different angle that, because of our bias, we sort of wouldn't have even thought of that. And I love to see that, especially when the judges see it and you can see in their eyes, it's like, wow, that is a really amazing idea. And I remember one year, the year of moving water, which we'll probably mention again, because that was a pretty fun challenge. But there were kids that figured out how to build a pump with no moving parts. And I won't tell you how they did it. It actually turns out it's a fairly common kind of pump. It just happened to be one that I'd never heard of. And there they were using this pump with no moving parts to move water, mind-boggling. So it wasn't the way we expected it to be, but it was cooler.
Yeah, and I think too, they also use, sorry, Alan, they use like crazy supplies that we would never expect. Like in 2018, we had a team that was looking around for something to kind of be a weight on the bottom of their design, because it was a challenge where things got dropped, and they needed something that could serve as a weight, and then so that their device would land in a certain direction, but also kind of cushion their device a little bit. And they ended up taking the fin off one of their dad's backup surfboards, and using that as their weight. So I think just the way they utilize materials and things in their surroundings that is just really, they blow our minds every year. We're just wowed by the amazing things they come up with.
You remember those Girl Scouts with they had to move the penny a certain distance, and they made that thing like a frog's tongue that basically unrolled? It worked perfectly every time.
And that's how they talked about it too. They're like, well, we saw a frog catch a fly, and we had this idea. So it's really cool to see how they take inspiration from everything around them, and things that you would never expect could inspire a solution to a tech challenge.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. They really are coming up with ideas from everywhere. So the tech challenge is all about the engineering design process. Greg, can you tell us why that is, and how that relates to how engineers work in real life and next generation science standards?
For sure. The whole genesis of the tech challenge was a time in the history of the tech before we had a building. We were trying to convince the people in the community that a science museum would be a good thing, and yet we didn't have a science museum to show them. So we thought, let's launch this activity, this challenge, and then the people in the community can see how imaginative and technological their own children are. And kids are great at using the engineering design process because it's very intuitive. You have to start with empathy. You have to understand the needs of the people for whom you're working. What problem are you trying to solve? It takes a while to even define the problem in the terms that the users or the people with the need actually have. And then, as Abby mentioned, you prototype, you brainstorm, you prototype some more, rapid prototypes, more brainstorming back and forth until you come up with an idea that you think might work. And then you do some serious testing on it. This is where it really gets into the world of real engineering. You don't just build a prototype and you're done. You build a prototype and then you test it to understand how it works and how it could be made better. Engineers are almost disappointed if their first prototype works or works too well. They want to have a prototype that fails, and if it works too well the first time, they'll actually push it to make it fail and see how far it can go, see where the edge of the envelope is. Then once you do that, you optimize the final design, and there you are, you have a solution. And hopefully you have a chance to showcase it like we do in the Tech Challenge, where experienced people that would maybe use it can comment on it and watch it and tell you what they think about it too. It really closes the loop. So it's a natural process, engineering design, but we don't teach it necessarily in school. So this is a great chance for the kids to pick it up, and they'll use it in any part of their career. Even if they don't become engineers, we're all designers. We design things every day, how to get someplace, how to make dinner, you name it, we're designers. So it's a skill that they will use widely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And speaking on all of the challenges that the kids are facing, we actually faced quite a different challenge in 2020. So the 2020 challenge was incredibly difficult because of the shelter in place. It was not the traditional tech challenge that we're used to having. So with that came a slew of its own challenges, and I think that our young engineers actually did quite well. Do either of you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I think they did amazing. So traditionally, Tech Challenge is kind of at the end of April, and that was true this year in 2020 as well. And shelter in place started a little bit over a month before that. It was like St. Patrick's Day. And so we really quickly had to switch everything to virtual, and the kids really quickly had to figure out how to potentially present what they had virtual. And there was a ton of testing and work that went into that for our team. But I think overall, everyone was pretty happy with the results, and we have a lot of ideas about how to make it even better for this year and even more awesome. And not all the kids were able to stick with it, but the ones that did, I think, just did an incredible job, and we're really pleased and really thankful to us for kind of keeping this moving at a time when a lot of things had been canceled. So they really appreciated the opportunity to get to share all the work that they'd done, even in cases where some of them had gotten stuck a little bit. Like we had some teams where their stuff was locked up at school and they couldn't go back to school, right? Because originally we thought shelter in place was going to be 2 weeks. And so they thought, I can leave this here for 2 weeks and come back to it. And that was just not to be. So I think it was really incredible to hear from all of them about their experience and what they created, and just see their amazing perseverance and the amazing work they did together, and how great they did at sort of rolling with things, just like our team. We were just figuring stuff out too. So I think everyone was really graceful with each other about how to figure out how to do this stuff. And this year, everything is going to be virtual, in the sense that all the events are virtual, and Final Showcase will be virtual again. And I think it's going to be a really awesome year. And we've designed the challenge with virtual in mind. So it's going to be a challenge that really lends itself to being virtual in a way that last year's challenge really didn't. So I think it's going to be a super fun, super awesome year. I can't wait to see what they built.
I have 2 comments to add to that. Number one, it blew my mind how quickly the kids made the transition to virtual communication and collaboration. And they totally got it. I think there wasn't a single team on the showcase day, all the teams that I listened in on while they were presenting their results, almost all of them mentioned that these skills we're learning in teamwork right now and remote collaboration, these are going to be super helpful to us in the future. And this is actually, they viewed this as a wonderful opportunity to learn skills that they're seeing their older brothers and sisters and their parents and everybody else having to learn at an older age. These kids are learning it now. So the silver lining, I think, inside this cloud is that they will already have some track record, some confidence in their ability to work collaboratively across international boundaries and you name it in the future, so that they can get big, complicated projects done. And like you said, Abby, to do it in a smooth, sort of graceful way. And the second thing is, we could have just folded our tent like a lot of other organizations did, but that's not the spirit of the Tech Challenge. The Tech Challenge is about challenges, and this was just one more challenge. I think the team and the staff, the volunteers, the parents, the advisors, the teachers, the kids, everybody that was on this giant team of ours did a great job rising to the challenge and sort of being patient with each other and having a little sense of humor if things weren't going as well as we hoped. But in the process of doing all that, I think it's fair to say that the Tech became a role model for many, many, many other institutions, schools, museums, and so on, even companies, by the way that we so quickly made this pivot.
So before we go further talking about 2021, there's some amazing things that you both just mentioned. And it is about the challenge of 2020 and how different it ended up being. So I think we actually have a few things to show you on the next slide here, because it ended up actually being kind of wonderful in a way.
Sound, TJ.
This year, we asked teams to explore a distant planet. Their mission: build devices to launch, land, and expand equipment for scientific research and life support.
Simulating launch. Inflating.
2020 provided an extra test of perseverance when the program and the world went virtual.
Ethan and I couldn't meet up and work on the device together, so we had to work on the models independently.
Engineers
around the globe can't just stop because of this pandemic. And we decided if we were really going to be engineers, we would persevere and push through.
And Silicon Valley leaders stepped up to cheer the teams on.
We support the Tech Challenge because we're a company of problem solvers. We're always looking for individuals and teams who can think of things differently.
Teamwork is everything. The idea of a lone inventor is a myth. The best inventions come from making connections between different points of view.
I like that we came up with amazing ideas that I would never imagine if I was on my own.
If we ever disagreed, we voted on whose idea we wanted to choose, or we just combined the two.
This is what makes the Tech Challenge so fun. You got to build it together as a team.
Engineering always seemed like this really far away, complicated concept. And I was like, I don't think I'm smart enough to do this, and I'm not really sure what it even entails. It never even occurred to me that that could be like a career.
It really opened my eyes to the world of engineering and trying something and then it not working and then trying again.
Failure is a gift. The hardest times in your life is what really makes you stronger. So embrace those.
If everything works perfectly first time, then you never learn anything. You never push the boundaries of what it is you're trying to do.
Failure is very important to success. Without failure, you have never succeeded.
I think seeing something through from just an idea to actually building it is something the Tech Challenge taught me.
There's no shortage of opportunity for you to bring technology and your creativity together to help us adapt and thrive in the next normal.
You are the future engineers, doctors, scientists, and virologists. In other words, you are our future.
Thank you for bringing your best. Thank you for persevering through everything that we're all going through. And thank you for making all of us proud of what you do.
I was able to hold on to the Tech Challenge, and that really allowed me to have a break from all the rough times that are going on right now.
I'm proud of myself and my whole team.
Good job, we did it. We finally did it.
Absolutely incredible. Those stories from those kids, so moving. Very, very profound statements coming from some of them. There is no success without experiencing failure. Absolutely incredible. So that was 2020. Abby kind of started talking about this, but let's keep it going for 2021. And this will be a question for both of you. Maybe we'll start with Abby again and then Greg. What are you most excited about for 2021?
So I think there are a lot of things to be excited about for 2021, honestly, because there are going to be a lot of firsts in 2021. So we're doing a bunch of things that we've never done before, partially because the format is different. And so, like I said, we've really designed this challenge to for students to be able to work on it physically distanced. So we don't know what the future is going to bring. We don't know what the world is going to look like in April. So we've made the decision that everything is going to be virtual for this year. And we've designed with that in mind so that they can work on this physically distanced and solve it together. And a couple of the things that we've done for this year because of that are, for example, we've picked it's going to be a cardboard challenge, which to be honest with you, I wasn't enthused about a cardboard challenge initially because I just thought, oh, cardboard. But now that we've started working on it, I'm actually super excited because they're going to get to pick to design their own problem, basically, that they want to solve. So they get to build something that's going to be like really uniquely personal to them and their team. And I can say as we've been prototyping, everyone's been building things that they really need now that they never needed at home before because they weren't at home all the time doing everything. And now they're at home and they're like, I wish I had X, and they're building it out of cardboard. So it's been super cool for us, I think, going through that experience. And I hope that the teams have just as much fun doing it. And I think they're going to come up with really amazing stuff. And the challenge for this year, they're going to have to design and build an item that they can then take those pieces and transform it into something else. And so I think we're going to see some really interesting combinations if our prototyping team is any indication. And so I'm just really excited for them to kind of, in a sense, get to design their own challenge to some extent and just see what they come up with. And yeah, I think it's going to be really inspiring.
Some things to add to that are, number one, I really feel that we can build on the momentum and the experience we got last year by continuing our efforts to make this challenge accessible and equitable for underserved kids. Anybody can come up with a virtual activity or event that is fine for kids with all sorts of resources and equipment and parental support and bandwidth and everything else. It's a much harder challenge to come up with an event or an activity or a project-based learning experience that's months long that all kids can be successful with. And Abby and the team at the Tech that's their main focus, I think. Every time we make a decision, that's the litmus test. Will this be something that all teams can do? And if not, then we got to find a better way. So I hope by the time that we come to the final showcase that we will see a lot of kids on the screen who never would have dreamed of even doing the Tech Challenge, let alone doing it in a virtual computer-based world like we're gonna be in. And I think the second thing, to echo another of Abby's points, is that our past challenges have always involved sort of a complicated, or maybe I won't say complicated, but a scenario that is a little bit impersonal to the kids. Going to Mars is exciting, but it's not something we're all gonna do. Whereas for me, for my first cardboard challenge, I built a little tripod thing to hold my camera so I could use it as an overhead, for a cooking show or something, you can have the camera vertically. I've always wanted one of those and I've been too cheap to buy it. And now I have one and it's made of cardboard. I'm so excited about it. I think of all these other things that I could build out of cardboard. And I'm hoping that the kids that freedom to design something that's important to them will be something they find super inspiring, that will sort of give them enough energy to persevere, like Team Determined here on the screen. They'll persevere through some of the obstacles that the COVID virus has put in their way and be super successful anyway. So those are just some things I think we're really looking forward to this year.
That's incredible. I'm hearing a lot of themes around accessibility and increasing accessibility for the 2021 Tech Challenge. I think that's absolutely amazing. So at this time, we are going to move to some of our audience questions, and we have one from Bill here. Bill says, "Tell us a little bit about the team dimension of the Tech Challenge. I suspect for fourth graders, this might be their first time working together. Do you have anything to say on that?"
Yeah, so I think for a lot of our, especially younger students, this is kind of the first time they've worked as a team. And I think teamwork doesn't necessarily come as an innate skill for a lot of us. If it did, we'd see 2-year-olds in the sandbox sharing their toys. Instead, they have to be taught that. So this is really a huge learning opportunity for them to learn how to work together and learn how to listen to each other. And I think one of the things that I find pretty incredible is we hear that throughout the process from the teams, that one of the big things they're really learning are the soft skills around like how to collaborate, how to listen, how to think about other people's ideas, how to incorporate suggestions from other people. And so like Greg was mentioning earlier, I think that's really one of the skills that they're going to take with them for anything that they do. And that's another reason why, the role of, we ask every team to have an adult advisor, and we really say that the adult advisor's role is to kind of help the team work together, not to do the project for them, not to design it, not to build it, not to do any of that stuff, but really to help kind of facilitate that working together and those relationships with the kids, because it is hard. And a lot of them, this is one of their first chances to practice it and build those skills.
If you look at the next generation science standards, the NGSS, which is the way that science is taught in California and many other states around the United States now, it's new and it's a little bit different, but in some ways it's back to some of the things that I think are the most exciting about teaching and learning science. Is it's very hands-on and experiential and phenomenon-based, NGSS is. And so I think that through teamwork and through these interactions, kids will learn several of the core science and engineering practices, which are enumerated in the NGSS, notably how to communicate, how to share information. And I think the most exciting one is how to argue from evidence. That's a new standard for science learning. They want the kids to learn to speak and act like scientists and engineers. Scientists don't just argue with each other, well, maybe they do, but hopefully they argue from evidence. And so they learn how to have a dialogue back and forth, and they separate the personality from the facts, and that allows them to make good decisions and to get insights that they wouldn't get otherwise. And if fourth graders can begin to do that, to begin to see my ideas are just as valuable as yours, I just need to communicate my evidence to you, and then if you're smart, you will support my ideas. And if you poke holes in it and I'm smart, then I will listen to what you have to say. Those are fantastic skills. I think that'll be a great outcome. The other thing I wanted to mention, we forget, but when the Tech Challenge started, I was on the board of directors of the Santa Clara Valley Science and Engineering Fair, which I love. I was a big participant in that as a kid, and I still love the science fair, and I still judge the science fair. And I still think the science fair is a super valuable experience for many, many kids. But at that time, long, long ago, they did not allow team projects. They were a little bit too complicated to judge, and they were hard to compare to each other based on who's on the team and so on. So it was easier just to make projects individual. And at that time, believe it or not, there weren't even very many engineering projects in the science fair. And that was another driver for creating the Tech Challenge. And we actually put on the first couple of Tech Challenges in collaboration with the science fair. But then we ran out of room because the Tech Challenge became bigger. And so now we have our own event. But it really, you could say it's an offshoot or an extension of the basic concept of a science fair, to turn it more into engineering, more into a project-based experience, and more into a team-based experience.
Wonderful, wonderful responses from you both. I noticed another theme that you both kind of talked on, the interpersonal aspect that these kids get. I think to the video we just watched about the 2020 Tech Challenge, where the students implemented a sort of democracy, a voting system, and whoever won, their idea goes forward, or they try to implement that idea into the other existing idea, which is very, very cool. So we do have another question here, and this one's going to be a little about your personal experiences with tech challenges. We'll start again with Abby. We'll move to Greg. What has been your favorite design challenge?
Ooh, that's like picking your favorite child. But I'll do it anyways. No, I have to say that I think for me, probably my favorite challenge is either 2014 Harnessing the Wind, which was an environmental kind of water challenge. It was really about like how could we use renewable energy to move water, and that's such an important issue for California because most of our water is not where people live, and even in Santa Clara County here, we get 55% of our water is imported from other counties in California. So for me, that was just very near and dear to my heart, and that feels really kind of like a real problem that we deal with locally. And then I think the other one for me that I really love was in 2015, we did an earthquake safe building challenge. And as someone who, grew up here locally, earthquakes are a big part of living in California, but I've also lived in Latin America and been in earthquakes in Latin America. And it really makes you appreciate building codes and building buildings to be safe, because that really keeps not just the cost of the damage from earthquakes down, but also it really keeps down the loss of life because things are safe for people. So both of those challenges were really fun for me because I felt really personally connected to them. And they were fun because they both had some crazy out-of-the-box solutions from the students, especially Harnessing the Wind in 2014. The kids came up with some stuff that we never even imagined could possibly work. One of my favorites from 2014 that actually didn't work, to be fair, was I had one team in 2014 that wanted to build everything out of frozen butter. And I was like, okay, how are you going to test that? And they were like, we're freezing butter right now, and we're going to see if it can float. And this is why teachers hate me, but and they decided frozen butter was actually not an ideal material for a variety of reasons, one of which is it's very hard to keep it frozen at room temperature. But it's just really cool to see the way kids get into it and the way they experiment with it. So those are favorites of mine. But Greg, what's your favorite?
Oh my God, I think they're all my favorite, but that's not a fair answer. Some of them were more favorite than others, I guess. I think one of the exciting ones that happened early on was the rainforest rope climb. And that's I forget how it came to be, but I think at the time, ecologists were just beginning to make forays into the rainforest to collect a lot more data than had been collected in the past. They'd done observations in the past, but they hadn't necessarily done a lot of data collection. So they were really eager to put instrumentation up in the top of these tall trees. What I didn't know, and what a lot of people didn't know, is you can't just climb up to the top of a tree in a rainforest. Number one, it's a long way from the ground, and there aren't many branches in the lower part of the rainforest. The other thing, which is really I didn't know, is there's a lot of tremendously dangerous creatures that live up there and don't actually ever come down to the ground. And if you enter that habitat, you better be ready to be, bitten and everything else by what's going on up there. And they weren't even actually totally sure what was up there in some of these trees. So the people doing the research were actually using crossbows to shoot ropes up into the tops of the trees so they could haul equipment up there, which was okay, but it was hard to get it down again. Very practical, to me, a very simple problem. So we assigned that was the first one, the rainforest rope climb. You had to build a gadget that could climb up a skinny nylon rope and then come back down. And then the second time we did it, the later year, you had to retrieve a ping pong ball while you were up there. And the kids didn't go, just the device. But literally, they could climb this, I think it was 12 feet or something. They could do this and come down in a few seconds. Well, unbelievable. And what I loved about it was up in the air, so that instead of a tech challenge that happens on the ground and all you see are the backs of the heads of the kids, this was happening up above. It was a super crowd pleaser. I think that was the year that crowd pleaser became one of our top criteria, along with deceptively simple for measuring the effectiveness of a project. Two other ones that I liked, there are a couple of them around energy, transferring energy from one form to another, like from wind to mechanical energy or water to mechanical energy, moving water. And what was so cool about those is, in my mind, it's a perfect, elegant linkage between science and engineering. There was a time when science, I talk like an old guy because I am an old guy, but there was a time that I remember when science and engineering were thought of as different disciplines, and engineers didn't really talk to scientists and vice versa. But now the differences are imperceptible, they're blended. And so harnessing energy, you have to know so much about physics, but you also have to know about friction and engineering, so that that blends together. And what's cool about this year's Tech Challenge is we're taking it to the art end, because you not only want to build something that works, you want it to be functionally beautiful, so that it's something people would want to have as a product. So we're going to blend that in too. It's the whole STEAM, spectrum will all be put together this year. But those are ones I love, ones where there's a real elegant science engineering connection, and one where people have a really great time watching it.
Very, very cool. A similar question, probably with a different answer. Again, we'll start with Abby and then move to Greg. What do you think has been the hardest or most difficult challenge?
So before I answer this, I would just say one of the things I find most hilarious in collecting data from our students is that we always ask them if they thought the challenge was too hard, just right, or too easy. So kind of a, Goldilocks and the Three Bears kind of situation. And it doesn't matter how hard we perceive the challenge to be, the same percentage of kids every year say that it's just right. They say it's like 85% of them always say it's just right. And then there's a small chunk that says it's too hard and a small chunk that says it's too easy. But I would say one that I thought was really hard, that I have to say I didn't expect was going to be so hard, was in 2016, we did a challenge called Taking Flight, which was a flight-based challenge. And they had to build gliders, and those gliders had to achieve lift to be able to meet the challenge. And that was actually a really, really hard challenge. even though people perceived it as being really easy because they're like, I can build it, gliders, it's like paper airplane, no problem. But it was actually really complicated and really hard. And one of the challenges with it was hard to tell why things didn't work. So you would, launch your glider and it would not achieve lift, very obviously, because it would not go up, right? It would go down towards the ground. But it was hard to figure out why that was. And so it was a very hard challenge for students to address, kind of like that issue of, okay, I have a prototype that doesn't work. What do I do next? And it was very hard to figure out what to do next. And for that reason, I thought it was a very difficult challenge. What do you think, Greg?
Well, it's another one of my profundities, but I think our most difficult challenge was one that we thought would be the easiest, because it was filling sandbags. There were a couple of years in a row where San Jose had so much rain that the bridges across West San Carlos, the water was right up to the bottom of the bridge at West San Carlos. I've never seen it before or after. Now that they've cleared out the floodway there, it probably will never happen again. But it was unbelievable. There was almost water running down in front of McCabe Hall there, towards the downtown. It was amazing. But so we had a project on filling sandbags, and we wanted them to do it in a semi-automatic kind of a way. And the kids said, well, why don't you just use shovels? And we thought, well, we're going to make shovels against the rules because everybody does it with shovels. And over time, we realized there's a reason everybody fills sandbags with shovels, because it's much easier. It's really hard to handle wet sand manually. The best way to do it is clearly with a shovel. So we persevered anyway, but that turned out to not be my favorite challenge. But for years after that, we kept that in the back of our minds, that we should never make against the rules something that's an obvious solution. We shouldn't try to make the problem harder than it actually is. We should let kids do what engineers do, which is leverage every single thing that's already been done over the history of mankind to solve the problem. And that includes using shovels to fill sandbags.
That is incredible. Absolutely incredible story. Why not just use shovels? So we actually have a follow-up question to something that Abby said earlier. Is the butter solution the most outrageous solution a team has come up with?
I don't know if it's the most outrageous. I will say that was a pretty out of the box material. I have not since had anyone ask if they could use butter. I will say probably the one that I think was most outrageous, and Greg may have a different answer to this question. I'd love to hear Greg's answer. But I had a student who, we have a long-standing policy in Tech Challenge where we don't allow teams to use animals as part of their solution. And animals also include things like younger siblings. That's a safety issue. But in 2014, we did not have that rule and necessarily, or that rule was not written down. And we had a team I had a team come to me, and they said this was a challenge where you had to basically use wind power to move water uphill was the challenge. And they said, well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to use hamsters, because hamsters run in balls and it's just completely wasted energy. They just run in the ball and the energy doesn't get used, and I could use that energy to move them uphill. And so I was kind of like, well, put a pin in the fact that that's not really wind energy. But I'm like, let's talk about real world applicability. How would that work in real life? And I have this little, fifth grader in front of me, and I said, okay, so if you then had to make your, device big enough so that it could send water over the mountains, how would that work? And he just looked at me and his eyes got really big and he was like, whoa, that would be a lot of hamsters, like so many hamsters. And then they ended up deciding hamsters were probably not the way to go. And now we have a rule, no animals. So
that's amazing.
Some people say there's no such thing as a bad idea, but there are bad ideas. And bad ideas often involve safety issues. So our judges, a great reason for doing the test trials is because our judges can help nip those things in the bud that kids might not think. They might think an idea is awesome, something they've never seen before. And maybe a reason they've never seen it before is because it's not safe. And I remember one year the kids had to climb up a ramp, carpeted ramp that had an exponential curve to it. So in the end, it was straight. It was a lot more difficult to do than you would think. So having some kind of traction on this industrial carpeting was vital. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to go up the ramp. So some team got the great idea that they would use 2 circular saw blades for wheels, which, you know, is a little bit unsafe just to begin with. And then they showed up at the trial, they had a little tiny on and off switch, was really hard to find. So once the thing was turned on, it sort of had a mind of its own. And of course, you could imagine it, no one was hurt, thank God. And as soon as we saw what it was, we made every effort to shut it off before it got out into the audience or anything like that. But since then, we've been pretty serious about working with the advisors to make sure that what the kids do is going to be safe. So if it's unexpected, that's great. But if it's unexpectedly dangerous, that's not good.
Both of your examples, while quite innovative, are definitely outrageous.
Yeah.
We probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions before we wrap it up for the day. We do have some more. Will there be any future robotics-based programming?
So the older tech challenges were definitely much more robotics based. And about 15 years ago, we kind of decided as a program that what we really wanted to do was we wanted to encourage kind of the widest possible participation in STEM. So both among, really among groups that tend to be underserved in STEM. So both among girls and students who are more likely to be like low income, have less access to quality STEM education. And we just really found that because of the cost of parts for things that really leaned robotics, that we just couldn't get that broad participation that we wanted. And so we kind of made a conscious decision as a program to stay in the mechanical engineering space, where really you're building stuff with easily accessible materials. Like this year's challenge is a great example. I mean, literally, like you can take your recycling and build your device. And so that's literally something anyone can do. You don't need any special tools. You don't need to spend a bunch of money to get a good solution. And that's really the space that we want to keep Tech Challenge in. So, you know, it's possible in the future. Definitely the cost of a lot of those materials has been coming down over time. So it's certainly possible if we get to a point where we feel like that we can make that accessible to all of our participants, we'd consider doing it. But until we can really feel good about the fact that every kid can access it and be able to get at the materials that they need in a reasonable cost point, we definitely won't be moving back into that space.
And these days, there are so many kits that kids can buy, robotics kits with parts and stuff already done that are modular. It's kind of like, you know, in the old days, it was the erector set. But nowadays, there's these programmable controllers and stuff, and you can build practically anything from some of these kits. That in a way, gets back to the sort of shovel idea that if that's the best solution, we shouldn't make it illegal to use those kits. But by using a kit, you only learn a little bit. Really, I saw a maker t-shirt one time that I thought was one of the best t-shirts I've seen. It says, "You don't really own something until you've taken it apart." That really stuck in my mind of we want kids to actually not just put together a bunch of components they got in a kit, but to actually design and build something of their own creation. So in lieu of doing robotics, I think we can still emphasize programming, modeling, simulation, all the other things. And we're toying with ideas of providing sensors, stuff like that, so kids could build things that are adaptive, which is a little bit of robotics, follow a path or whatever, but not with a kit, something that they have to actually build themselves. And of course, the equity part is always going to be top of mind.
That's very, very good to know. We do have one more question, and then we'll move on. Can we do the Tech Challenge as a homeschool family? What do you have to say to that?
Totally. We have a lot of families who do Tech Challenge as homeschool or just something they do with their siblings. And we love it. I say rock on. We can't wait to see what you build.
As long as the kids build it, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, that's true. That's true of everyone, though, not just homeschool. This is the kids' project. That's the big takeaway here. If you're excited about doing your own Tech Challenge, that's okay, but you can't compete with the kids and they have to build their own project.
Very, very important one. To remember. Okay, we are going to move on, but before we end today's event, Abby, can you share with the audience how can people get involved at this point?
So I'll tell you a secret. Technically, registration launches tomorrow, but it's actually already live on our website. So you can go to the website and register now if you would like to. It's at the top of the homepage, the Tech Challenge homepage. You can see the website there. We also have 4 workshops coming up with Bay Area Science Festival at the end of the month. They'll be happening Wednesday, October 22nd through I think it's actually Saturday, October 24th, but it's 4 days in a row, and they'll be every day at 3 p.m. And so you can participate in those as well. Each workshop is on a different topic, so it's a different design challenge every day. And if you're interested in volunteering, we will be starting to recruit volunteer judges in February 2021. So watch for information on that. And thanks so much for coming today to listen to us talk about Tech Challenge. We're super excited for 2021, and definitely don't hesitate to reach out with any questions.
And if you're a former participant or you know any former participants, I cannot tell you how much it means to the team to hear their stories. After 34 years, I hear from teachers who participated. I hear from kids who are now, super successful in science and industry. I hear from other kids who it was their first chance to do something and be part of a team. And now they're adults and they have their own children. So if you have stories or know people with stories, we love to hear them.
That's
and
right.
I will real quick, Alan, I will say we do have a couple regular Tech Challenge judges who volunteer to judge, every year for the last several years, who are alums who did Tech Challenge themselves and had such a great time. They just keep coming back. So we love, as Greg said, we love to hear all your stories about Tech Challenge. They keep us going. So sometimes it feels very lonely in working from home, shelter in place. So it can brighten our day.
Yeah, share your stories, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We love to hear them. So I really want to thank both Greg Brown and Abby Longcor for their time today, all of the behind the scenes knowledge, the amazing stories, the inspirational tales. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being members. We are very, very excited about the things that are coming up in the Tech's future. We're very excited about this new Tech Challenge for 2021, this new cardboard challenge. We're really hoping that everybody else is excited as we are. We hope to see you in the next member event in the very near future, and we hope that you all have a lovely evening. I've been Alan. Thank you guys so much. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you next time, okay?
Thanks, Alan.